In this video, I'm going to go over all the settings of the shader so you can have a basic understanding of what the effects look like, how you can use them, and what the function is. In future videos, I'll go over how to get started, a very basic intro, and how you can use them to set up a scene, how you can animate them, and how you can use code outside of the shader to manipulate values to have cool effects like the depth effect that I'm using in the video. You have your sprite, it's already in the scene. You have your normal map. So those are the two prerequisites, a sprite and a normal map, and a light 2D. So you need your light 2D. So we're going to create a new shader material. We are going to load or copy and paste the shader. And then you'll see it's already started to do its thing. So you have your basic settings. The first stage, that's your first stage of lighting there. So you have unlit and lit. You can adjust the size and you can adjust the smoothness. So I like it a little bit smoother for this. And then there's a second stage. You can add another stage. So right now it's using a halfway point. It's half the brightest light. You can also smooth that. The rim light is to add an extra little border of light. So the idea is it's adding an extra little shine to it. You can adjust the thickness, you can adjust the intensity, and you can click add an extra thickness, which is having the shader do another pass at creating the border. And this rim light is based off of the outline shader from GDQuest. From the rim light, you can see minimum light, mid light, and maximum light settings. The maximum light will bring down how much light there actually is allowed to be. The mid light is your second stage light, how bright or dark it is. If you leave it at 0, it will default to having the brightest light, multiplying it by half, I mean. And then the minimum light is the actual shadow. So if you want it to be a little bit brighter, you can change this. You'll get some funky effects after a certain degree because what I'm doing is changing the light vector in the shader to trick the object into having light where there actually is none. So depending on the angle of your light source, you may get this gradient effect. So just beware of that little defect because normally there's just no light information at all, and I'm kind of tricking it. The object light add option is it adds the original light source information on top of the cell shader. So basically the more gradiated light, the more softer light that you would normally get from your normal map is added on top of the cell shader, and that can have some cool effects depending on what you're wanting to do. The fake light depth. This is where the more complicated type of stuff comes in, and I'll have a more complicated explanation as to what is happening and why. But you check this on, and what I have a script right now that if it's using light depth, it's scaling it up and down. So if your object height is essentially like your light 2D range height. I'm setting the height to be different based off of the light 2D range. So the maximum is 2048. The minimum is negative 2048. And my script, which I can go over in a different video, is essentially how I'm scaling it up and down with the height. And this will just serve as a better visual representation of what's actually happening. So the light, if we look at our sunlight here, our sunlight is at negative 278. That's the height, negative 278. So our orb right now is at 0. So if I bring it down, this far, it's way behind the light. So you can see, well, I'm going to mess up that little bit, but you can see how the light changes based off of the height, because now it thinks, oh, it's way behind the light, so the light angle is a little different. The amount of the object that's lit is a little different. And that's what's happening there. And you can adjust all of this in real time. And I'm actually going to take off the object light add so you can see more of what's happening there. And so this is what the fake depth does. It fakes the light depth. So where most objects normally are always viewed at 0, the faking of it is bringing it down below 0. So even if the light is -273 or whatever it was, you can put it behind the light. And that's what that is accomplishing. The scale, the minimum scale, the maximum scale, that's what I'm using in my code here to determine how much it can be scaled up or down as a percentage of the difference between 2048 and 2048, negative 2048 and 2048. That's what those settings are for. I left them there for the full shader in case other people can use it. It's kind of a thing that I built for myself, but I thought it was easier to have it built into the shader and keep all these settings in one spot. The light change threshold is the distance at which the light will start changing from whatever the default engine value would be. So as it comes farther away, right now you see this is kind of the default behavior of the light. So if the light is at, what was it at? Let's go back and look. Light's at -278. So let's set our orb to be the same. If I could type 278. So let's say I want the threshold to be once it is 800 away. So once the gap is 800, I want the light to start changing. So that means our object height has to hit -1078, and then the light will start to change. And I want the light to fade. So I'm going to say the light starts fading, and once it hits 1078, I want it to fade to black after 300 more. So that means by -1378, it should be completely unlit. So now, if I drag this down, you can see the light fade away once it hits 1378. But let's say I don't want the light to fade. I want it to shrink. Like I want it to feel like the light source has a border on it almost, and I'm leaving that border. All right, well, let's go back to bring this back to -278. And I want to use the fake spotlight. That's that light border type of thing. Right now at 0, 0, nothing changes. But let's say I know at this point of the height, I want all this light to shrink. So I can shrink it with this, and I could shrink the first one here. And now when I come back up, I've got normal light, and you'll see at the light's at -278. You'll see at -1078, the light will start to shrink. And that's how you use that setting. And then coming down here to before light modulate, this is like normal modulate, except the light is unaffected by it. Right now, if you look at modulate, if you want to modulate this whole thing, let's say you want to just make it darker. If you use black to do that, it blackens even the light to the point where it's just black, black. But the before light modulate will do its pass but not affect the light. So you can take this down to black, but things that are light are still lit up by the original color. So that's what this is good for. You can change your modulation without affecting your light. That wraps up the overview of the settings. If you'd like to start using the shader now, you can check it out on Godot Shaders. The link will be in the description, as well as a link for GitHub if you'd prefer to download files and work from those files. Descriptions of the settings, what they are, what they do, are on both pages, as well as some sample code for tying the object height to scale and Z depth, as well as thank yous to the people who've either helped me directly or indirectly, such as Azagaya from Lighter, Toast Eater on GitHub, Cyber Reality on Reddit, and GD Quest. I've used resources either that they put available online or contacting directly, and it was super helpful in making this shader. If you're taking a look at this and you know how to make the shader better, by all means, please make it better. I put it on GitHub so you can fork it. Just contact me, let me know what you're doing with it. I'd love to use the best version possible. If you're using it in your project and you've made something cool with it, send me a message. I'd love to see what you've done with it. The link will be in the description, both to Godot Shaders and to GitHub. And I'll also put one in there for Lighter, which is an open source, a free and open source normal map generation program put out there by Azagaya. And if you need help creating normal maps, this is a great program for that. And I'll go over more about normal maps and how you can get started in another video. For now, that's about all the time I have. So thank you very much. And I hope this is helpful.